All right, so, sometimes the stories that really grab you are the ones that kind of pull back the curtain on something you thought you had a handle on. That's what we're diving into today. A listener, one of you out there, sent us some pretty compelling stuff, excerpts from a discussion about Social Security, non-citizens, and, well, some potential issues that were brought to light, let's say.
Yeah, exactly. We dug into what you shared, detailed accounts, numbers, the whole 9 yards. And our goal here is to break it down for you, clearly explain what we're seeing, and explore what it could all mean without getting lost in the weeds.
Okay, so the way this whole thing starts in the source material is actually pretty interesting. It sounds like they weren't even looking for what they ended up finding. It was supposed to be about fraud in the Social Security system more broadly, and then boom, they take a turn and land somewhere unexpected.
It's that unexpected turn that really makes this so fascinating. They're investigating the system, and according to the speaker, they bump into this surprisingly large number of Social Security numbers that are being issued to people who aren't U.S. citizens. Not what they set out to find, but it becomes a key finding.
And the scale of it is, well, it's not small. The source specifically mentions 270,000 instances in 2021, and then get this, they're projecting a jump to 2.1 million in 2024. That's a huge increase in a pretty short time. 2.1 million, that's a lot of people.
It is. It really is. And the way the speaker frames this is crucial. They're very clear that this isn't some politically motivated thing. They even talk about their own background, having immigrant parents, and how they actually support legal immigration. It's presented as like a neutral observation about how the system works.
Right, and that context definitely matters. When someone with that background is raising a flag, it hits differently. The source also mentions these very good people inside the government who provided this information, even hinting that they might be putting themselves at risk by doing so. Makes you wonder what's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, definitely raises questions about who knows what and how these processes are being handled within these agencies. So, okay, the source then goes on to explain the how. How are non-citizens reportedly getting these Social Security numbers? What are the main entry points?
Well, from what they describe, there are two main ways this is happening. One is through the official ports of entry, where individuals can claim they're afraid to go back to their home country, starting that asylum process. The other, and they really hit on this, is crossing the border directly. They even mentioned talking to Border Patrol agents who confirmed this is happening.
And the steps after that, as they lay it out, seem pretty straightforward. After entering the U.S., either way, individuals can apply for a work document using a Form I-765. Just for clarity, that's a standard application for anyone who wants to legally work in the U.S. And if that's approved, they get an employment authorization document, often called Form I-766.
Okay, so here's where the source really highlights a key point. They claim that once someone has this work authorization, a Social Security number is automatically sent out in the mail by the Social Security Administration. No in-person interview, no ID verification like you might expect. That's what they're saying.
Yeah, that's a big detail. They're very clear that this isn't some recent oversight or a little mistake. They're calling it a massive, large-scale program. That language definitely suggests a systemic thing, not just isolated cases.
So if these numbers are accurate, we could be talking about millions of non-citizens getting Social Security numbers this way. And the source doesn't stop at just the facts, right? They go on to suggest a possible motive behind it all.
Right, the speaker makes a pretty bold claim. They're saying that the intention behind this whole program is to increase the number of voters. The goal, they claim, is to create a permanent, deep blue one-party state, which, according to them, would mean American citizens lose their voice. It's a pretty strong statement about the underlying political goals.
And they even allege that the way the system is set up, the defaults for this group are what they call max inclusion, max pay when it comes to benefits, and minimum collection when it comes to any obligations. As an example, they point to 1.3 million individuals from this population who they say are already on Medicaid.
And to bring it back to voting, the source goes on to say that they found individuals from this group registered to vote, and there are even reports of some having voted. They mentioned that these cases have been sent to Homeland Security investigations, so it sounds like someone's taking it seriously at some level.
This whole thing and the picture they paint, it definitely raises some serious questions about how secure and how fair our systems really are. But then the conversation in the source takes a turn towards what they call the truly disturbing and darkest side of this, the human tragedy.
Yeah, this shift in focus is really important. It highlights the human cost. the potential for real suffering that they're connecting to this system. They estimate that human traffickers have made somewhere between 13 and $15 billion because of this. That's an insane amount of money.
They describe how people in other countries are paying cartels and traffickers huge sums of money to get them to the U.S. border. They even cite figures from ICE talking about 30,000 children who haven't shown up for their check-ins after entering the U.S. And get this, 270,000 children who didn't even get the initial notices to appear in the first place.
And this is where it gets really dark. The source brings up this claim that children are being trafficked back and forth across the border to create what they call complete families. And they emphasize the very real dangers. People dying on the journey, the possibility of ending up in forced labor to pay off these huge debts to traffickers with threats to their families back home. It's a horrible picture.
Yeah, the speaker really contrasts this with the idea that we don't do this here in America,
Yeah.
emphasizing the importance of legal immigration and highlighting the exploitation they see happening here. It's a bleak look at the potential human cost of these border crossings.
It is. So the source also talks about these financial incentives being offered at the state level, which they see as adding fuel to the fire. What specific examples do they give?
They talk about how New York tried to pass a law to let illegal immigrants vote, but the state Supreme Court stopped it. They also highlight California, where healthcare is available to all illegal immigrants, and how the cost of that has gone way up. It was supposed to be $3 billion, but now it's at $9 billion and still climbing.
The point they're making is that these kinds of state-level actions create a huge financial incentive for people to come to the U.S. without authorization. They also mention that any talk of cutting back or stopping payments to this population is causing a major backlash.
Yeah, and the source even gives specific examples of how federal money, specifically FEMA funds, are reportedly being used to house illegal immigrants in, like, fancy hotels in New York City, welcome packages, debit cards, the whole deal. It all ties back to their earlier claim that this could be the biggest voter fraud thing in history.
That's a strong statement for sure, and it shows just how concerned they are about this. They then shift the focus to the timeline and what they see as the long-term consequences if all this keeps going. What's the time frame they give for a potential path to citizenship?
They say it could take about 5 years from the initial asylum application to potentially getting citizenship. The big worry they raise is that if this many people keep coming in this way, it could lead to a massive legalization of this population. And they say that could change the whole political landscape, wiping out swing states and leading to a one-party system that's basically set in stone.
Right, and they also talk about how the number of people accessing benefit programs is going up really fast, which they see as another problem. And get this. They mention that ICE estimates there could be another 7.5 to 8 million people in the country without any official record. Really shows the scale of the situation as they see it.
Which brings us to voter ID requirements and the whole question of election security. What does the source say about why voter ID is so important in this context?
Well, their argument is that since Social Security numbers are basically being used as federal ID to get all sorts of benefits, even though they weren't designed for that, that making sure voter registration is legit becomes super important. Without proper checks, the potential for problems is a lot higher.
And they talk about how easy it is to get a Social Security number, even as an adult. They say you can just use things like utility bills, medical bills, even school IDs, which, if that same number can then be used for other things, that does seem like a potential weak spot.
Yeah, that ease of getting a Social Security number, plus the reports of people from this population being registered to vote, leads them to worry that political operatives could basically take advantage of this and manipulate elections. So they keep coming back to this fear of a major power shift, potentially leading to this one-party system that could change everything.
They even bring up California as an example of a state with a dominant party. They say at least there you can move out of state if you don't like it. But if the whole U.S. ends up like that, well, there's nowhere else to go.
Right. Towards the end, the source mentions this direct quote, "Help us clean up Wisconsin." Sounds like a call to action. And they emphasize how simple it would be to just require a photo ID to vote. Like buying alcohol, getting on a plane, things everyone's used to.
And they point out what they see as a kind of double standard. They say some people who are against voter ID are okay with vaccine ID requirements. The final point they make is that protecting the integrity of our elections should be a fundamental goal, something everyone can agree on, regardless of their political leanings.
Okay, so, big picture. Our deep dive into this material has highlighted some major concerns that were raised. We've got this unexpected finding about Social Security numbers being issued to non-citizens, the processes involved, the potential consequences they describe, both political and humanitarian, and this whole discussion about voter ID. It's a lot to take in.
It is. So what do you think? What are your thoughts on the situation where, according to this information, a non-federal ID could potentially give someone access to benefits, even get them registered to vote? What kind of safeguards do we need to make sure these systems are secure and fair?
Those are the big questions. Really makes you think about the cracks in the system and what we need to do to make sure things are working the way they're supposed to.
We encourage you to think about what we've talked about today, do your own research if you want to learn more, and come to your own conclusions on this complex and potentially really significant issue. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.